Welcome, GDC here. I'm bringing you a new puzzle from blackjackfitz called Mystery Cages Somedoku. Let's go straight into the rules. So this is a Somedoku puzzle, which means that we will fill each row n and each column n with n distinct digits and have repeats on the other digits. So we could have, in row 1 we could have only one digit. It could be all 2s or all 3s, but they must all be the same. And in row 9, we need 9 different digits. So there it is, like in a normal Latin square puzzle. And in between, we have the corresponding amount of digits. The second rule we have are just the usual difference Kropki dots. So those two digits differ by exactly 1. We also have ambiguous cages. Each cage in the grid is either a killer cage or a look and say cage. So a killer cage is the cage you're probably most familiar with. It just means that those, for example, would add up to 17. If it is a look and say cage, however, it would say that there is 1 7 in this cage, or in this case, it would say that there are 6 9s in this cage, and so on. And we don't know which cage is which, but we know that each cage satisfies exactly one of those two properties. So this can be a killer cage, but if it is, it cannot also be a look and say cage. It can be a look and say cage, but then it may not be also a killer cage, and it's also not okay if none of those two are satisfied. With that, I'm going to restart the clock and see how I get on. So usually with Somedokus, the first place to look is row 1 and column 1, because these are all the same digits. And I can see that there is this 69 cage, which it's very plausible to think that this cage just contains 6 9s, so we could put 5 9s here and put another 9 here. That would be the maximum number of 9s, and then this would be one way to satisfy the 69 cage. If we don't do that, I think this digit will still have to be pretty high, so we can get high enough. So let's see what's the maximum we can achieve here. 1 2 3 4 5 6 9s would be 6 times 9 is 54, and then we would still need another 15 here, which would be 8 7, and that would be forced, but that would imply that we already have 69 cage. So I'm pretty sure that these must all be 9s now, and that this is not specifically 7 8, but I'm just going to quickly recheck the math here. So this is 54, and to get to 69 we need 15. Okay, but it's pretty clear that this is not 8 7 because of these cages, although this could be this could also be look and say cages. But what we do know is that this is not exactly 8 7. This 26 cage is probably the next place to look, but I can fill in all those 9s now. Yeah, this 26 cage and the 36 cage make me think that it's probably gonna be 6s that are it seems like 6s are very likely here. Maybe we can disprove that. Maybe I will give this one just a color for the cage type. I'm just going to denote look and say cages as let's use some pastelish color as green. Okay, so we know that this is a look and say cage. Okay, let's see, can this be a look and say cage? It would need 3 6s here, and then we would have 18 plus another 18, and that would be 36. So if it is a look and say cage, it would also be a killer cage. Yeah. So it is always a killer cage, and since it's always a killer cage, it's never a look and say cage. So I'm going to make this one red for killer cage. Can we do something similar here? If we have two sixes here, it would be 12. Then the third digit would have to be a 9. But that works. So, yeah, that's a little bit unfortunate. So we could make this look and say cage if 6 is the second digit in the row. This would also put a 6 here and then prevent this from ever becoming a killer cage. So that looks pretty good. But if 6 is the second digit introduced in the row, we might run into issues here. I can't quite see what's happening here. Let's see, if we have two 9s here, if we try to make this a killer cage, we would have to make this 9, 9, and then an 8, right? Because then we have 18 plus 8. So the second digit for the row is either an 8 or a 6, depending on whether this is a killer cage or a look and say cage. So it seems this 11 is also very interesting, because if this is a look and say cage, we obviously need a 1 in column 2, which would put pressure on this 36 because that's pretty high. If it's not, then 2 would be the new digit for the column. So the new digit introduced in column 2 is either a 1 or a 2, depending on what type of cage this is. And what we can see now is that the new digit for column 2 and the new digit for row 2 are different, which means that row 2 column 2 must be a 9. Because if it was this digit, it would also be the new digit for column 2, and this would clash. So since there are no overlaps between those options, I can write a 9 in here. And now I know a lot more about the 36 cage. I'm just going to center mark here. So this is 6, 8, 9. Right, so we have 3 9s, that's 27. And to get to 36, we need another 2 digits that sum to 9. So none of these can be 9s. And now I need to sum to 9 here, which will be 8 and 1. Right, so I get a 1 here and I get an 8 here. And now I know that this is not a 7. So I'm just, that might actually be relevant. I'm just gonna mark it as not 7 like this. Because we said before that this 69 would be a valid killer cage if this is 8, 7, and these are 6 9s, because then we get 54 plus 50. And it seems very relevant because we have like 7s here in these cages, so it's very likely that this will be a 1 if the new digit introduced in row 3 is a 7. Okay, but we now know that this is a proper 1-9 pair. What do I mean by proper pair? It means that this is not 2 9s and this is not 2 1s, because this is now a look and say cage, like this. We can center mark this as 2 or 8, which might be useful because we already have a little bit of information about column 2. But I want to look at this now, because this can no longer be a look and say cage, so this is a killer cage. And it will contain, well, it will contain 2 9s and 1 8. I don't really know how to mark that. Maybe I will corner mark 9s to say that 9s appears twice. and I can also just center mark those. Okay, so this is already a pretty good start. I can see multiple places to look next. Now, this 15, if it is a killer cage, it would be exactly 8-7, but that seems pretty likely. It would make it hard for this to be a look and say cage if this is 8-7, because we couldn't fit an 8 here. So the only way to make a look and say cage would be to have 2 8s in this row, which would do things. This is also interesting because if this is a look and say cage, we get a second 9 in row 8, and we are only allowed 1 repeat in row 8, so that would just eat up the repeats. And if this cell in particular, and if it's a killer cage, this, well, what's another way to put it? If it doesn't create a repeated 9 in this row, then this becomes a 1, and this becomes a killer cage, and that doesn't work. Okay, so I've just proven that this cage, what have I shown exactly? If I don't introduce a repeated 9 in these 3 cells, then this becomes a 1. Yeah, I have shown that there is a 9 in one of those 2 cells. But that, yeah, and that implies that this is a look and say cage, because I cannot put a second 9 into this cage, because I'm not allowed to have any repeats here, and only 1 repeat here. So I've used up the repeats for row 8, which is quite big, and I've satisfied this as a look and say cage, and now I just need to make sure that the 2 digits that are not 9s, that they don't add up to 10. So if this is a 1, it will always be fine, because then this becomes a 9, and I cannot put 9 here anyways. But if this is a 9, I will have to make sure that those are not like 4-6 or 5-5. Okay. The fact that I have used up the repeats here might be interesting for the 28 maybe, because 28 is very hard to make. Yeah, I mean, it's still possible to put 8-7 here and 8-7 here. I mean, that would imply 2 8s, but I think I can make it 8-7 and 7-6, and this would be exactly 28. Yeah, that would be forced. If this is a killer cage, it's actually forced to have 8-7 and 7-6, and because then it couldn't be a look and say cage, and with only 1 8 we're very limited. So there is a lot of pressure on this, but I'm not sure if it's the next place to look. I can see something here with the 1-5. So if this is a killer cage, this would imply that this is a 7. The only way to make it is make it 8-7 based on these center marks. If it's a look and say cage, this becomes a 5. And if this is a 5, this would have to be an 8, because we cannot introduce a new digit. If this is a 7, it's also an 8. So this can never be a 2. Yeah, another way to see it is, if this is a 2, we have used up all the available digits for the column, so we would have to put a 2, 8, or 9 into this cell, and whatever we put in, we cannot satisfy the cage. we cannot make it a valid look and say cage, and we cannot make it a valid killer cage. So this is always an 8, but that doesn't tell us what cage type it is. It just disambiguates this 9-1, which means that row 5 became a little bit more interesting, but I still think there isn't enough in row 5 yet to really do things. Although the white Kropkis are interesting because all these digits are odd, and we have to introduce at least one even digit to make the white Kropkis work. But yeah, I don't think row 5 is the place to look for now. What could be the next? This was interesting the last time I looked at it. It looks very plausible that these are just look and say cages, and that 7 is the new digit in this row. But there might be other options. If we don't introduce a 7 in the row, then both of these cages become killer cages. What does that mean? That means we could put yeah, that's actually not so easy to do. We could make this 8-8-1. If we put a 9 in it, yeah, we could make it 9-4-4. Yeah, I see a few options. Maybe this 13 now, because we know in column 3 we have 3 digits, and those are selected from 9, 8, and whatever this digit is. So I can just center mark 9, 8, 5, 7 here, and this means that this is always a killer cage. That's the wrong red. This. And the only way to add up to 13 with those available digits is 5 and 8. So one way to see it is to say, okay, we need an even digit here, because if we use 2 odd digits, we get a parity problem. And as soon as we have locked in the 8, the other digit is fixed. Right, and now we know that there is a 5 in this column, which means this is a 5. And this just became a look and say cage. And yeah, that's not too interesting for this cell actually. I mean, I can still write it in. Maybe there is one option that just doesn't work with the row, but I will look at this a little bit later. Right, we have 5, 8, 9 here. This will be 5 or 8. Good. Yeah, that looks like we cannot really do anything more than this. Is there any problem if we make this a 9? It would make this a 1, but then we can fill in whatever here. If we make this a 9, this becomes another 9. This is just a 5-8 pair, and it's never a valid killer cage. So we don't have to worry about this anymore, really, as long as we have one 9 here. This is a 5. There is that's actually interesting. If this is a 5, we get an 8-7 here. So we have like an 8 in one of those 3 cells, which means that we cannot have an 8 here. We also cannot have 2 8s here, so this is always a killer cage. That's very unexpected. I'm just going to double check this. If this is an 8, this can never be a look and say cage because it cannot get enough 8s. This is a 5, this becomes a 7-8, and now this, yeah, that's valid. And that's pretty big because I said earlier that if this is a killer cage, it's 8-7 and 7-6. And we've already shown that there is an 8 in one of those three, so the only way to maximize this is like this. Now we have 15 plus 13, which sums to 28. This 7, 8 looks here, and we can eliminate the 8 here because we already have a repeat in this row. This is not an 8. This 12 seems suspicious because the highest digit we can put into here is a 6, and we cannot repeat the 6. So we can never make this a killer cage. So this will be a look and say cage. So there will be a 2 in one of those. And now we don't have to worry about this anymore because we can never make it a valid killer cage. This one, I said earlier that if this is a killer cage, it would be 8-7, but that's no longer possible because we have the 7 locked in here. So this is also a look and say cage, which contains a 5, which knocks out a 5 from here, makes this an 8. I think we can already center mark those 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, this 11 is kind of interesting. Is there a reason this cannot be a 1? I don't think so. I think this, I mean, a 1 here would put a 9 here and a 5 here, but that's fine. The other digits that are hard to place into this, to row 8, I don't think so. Maybe let's look at column 4 now. Well, these could both be 7s, and these could both be 9s, which means that there is a lot of flexibility in this column. The candidates for this column tend to be relatively high digits, so it wouldn't be surprising if this is just a killer cage. But we also have flexibility to introduce new digits, so I can see 5 working here. I can see a look and say cage working here. I can say killer cage working here. That's not really an issue either way. Yeah, I was hoping we would get more info on row 3 because the last time I looked at row 3 it didn't look too interesting. Maybe there's a problem with one of those options. If this is an 8, then this means that this has to be a killer cage, and it would have to be 8-8-1 with a 8-1 pair here, which seems fine. This is a 5, we need 12. That seems impossible. Yeah, we cannot make 12 in 2 cells, so this is never a 5. Right, and if this is an 8, it forces 8-8-1, which is quite interesting. If this is a 9, I think we can just introduce a 7 as the new digit here. If this is a 9 and this is a look and say cage, we need 8 more, which couldn't be 1-7, which couldn't be 2-6, couldn't be 3-5, could be 4-4. So this is either 9-4-4 or 8-8-1, or it is a look and say cage, in which case this is a 9. So could center mark the digits here. So this is either 1, 4, 8, or, well, it's not a 7. It's 8-8-1 would put a 1 here. 9, if we introduce a 7, this puts a 1 here. And 9-4-4 is the only option that doesn't put a 1 here. So it seems like 1 in this column is pretty interesting. And if we could prove that this needs a 1, we would get a 4 here, and this would resolve to 9, 4, 4. And this would also resolve to 9, 4, 4, which is interesting for this column actually, because we already have a repeat in column 8. Yeah, maybe let's look at this a little bit more. Right, so I don't really see row 3 being too fruitful at the moment. We managed to reduce this to just 2 options, but I think it's time to look somewhere else. This 19 cage is definitely a killer cage, which is good, because we already have a repeat in the column. And 19 cage without an 8, without a 9 is a little bit restricted. It needs an 8 because 765 adds to 18. And I think there will only be 2 options now. It's either 4, 7, 8 or 5, 6, 8. So yeah, there is not too much interaction with this 4, 7 or 5, 6. Yeah, that's almost good. That's probably not the place to look at the moment. Right, if this is a killer cage, it has to be exactly 7 and 6. It's the only way it works. And this would force this to be a look and say cage, because once we use up 9, 8, 7, and 6, we cannot get to 11 anymore. So making this a killer cage would make this a look and say cage. If this is a look and say cage, it uses up the 3, which doesn't seem as impactful. 6. Yeah, because that just means that this, I mean, this could still be 7, 4, 6, 5. Yeah, if this is a killer cage, it will never use the 3. So putting a 3 here doesn't really affect this. So that's probably not the place to look. I can also see this 31, which is very interesting, because this is a look and say cage. It uses up all the repeats for this row, which is quite fun. And that makes this a 9, and yeah, prevent any more repeats in the row, including this cell, which would be interesting. But if it's a 31, it's also very interesting. 31 in 4 cells wouldn't be possible with normal Sudoku rules. But since digits may repeat in a cage here, we can just put in a lot of 9s and be done. But that also might use up some of the repeats for the row, because we already have a 9 here. So it might be possible to show that we need a lot of repeats between those cells, which might imply that this is a 1. It also be... Oh, that's interesting. Actually, if this contains 3 1s, we would use up all the repeats for the row. But now, what's this? It couldn't be another one because it would introduce another repeat in the ones, but it also couldn't be a 9. So this is actually a killer cage. That's good. That's very good. So let's see. I don't have a good intuition for cages that can have repeats. So if we don't use a 9, what's the highest we could make this? 888 is 24 plus 7 would be 31. So there is only one way to make this work if we don't use a 9. 8887, which would make this a 1, this a 5. Would be very impactful. But there is nothing wrong with using a 9 here, I think. Yeah, I don't quite see it yet. What's happening here? This is definitely okay. I could have filled in this like immediately if I just looked at it. This will always be a look and say cage. We just cannot make 22 in 2 cells, even with the rules here. So maybe there's something else like this. 34 is possible with 9898. That would be 17 plus 17 is exactly 34. Otherwise, we have 3 4s in this. So that's like both options are very interesting. 3 4s would introduce a 4 in this row, in this row, in this column, and in this column, no matter how we arrange them. But that seems fine. Like we are already in column 5 here, so there's still a lot of flexibility. And like 9-8 in this row seems very natural. It just works very well with what we already have. But also just introducing a 4 in this row doesn't seem like it's going to create major issues. Okay. There's probably just some clue that I haven't looked at yet. It might be impactful. These Kropki dots are just standing out to me because we have to introduce at least one even digit. And if the odd digit here, for example, is a 1, then we introduce a 2. If it's a 5, we introduce a 4 or a 6. If it's a 9, we introduce an 8. And what's interesting about this is that if we use a 1 here and a 5 here, we will introduce 2 different even digits here. So there is quite some tension caused by these white Kropkis. So, for example, if we would be able to show that this is a 3, then it would follow that the 2 even digits here must be the same, which would mean that the odd digits almost always are the same. Okay, where to look next? I feel like row 3. I feel like there is something about row 3 that I'm just not understanding. Like the 944 option is the only option that prevents this from being a 1. Maybe there's something wrong with this being a 1 in this column. Because if this is a 1, we get this as a killer cage. And making this a killer cage makes this a look and say cage. I proved that earlier, that if this is a killer, it's just eats up all the high digits. So if this is a 1, this becomes a killer cage, this becomes a killer cage. These sum to 24. Plus 17 would be 41, and that breaks. Okay, so this is just a 4. And the only way we could make that work is with 9, 4, 4. Yeah, I was suspecting that there is something going on here. So just to recap this, I proved earlier that if this is a killer cage, it eats up all the high digits, and this becomes a look and say cage. Well, if we assume that this is a 1, this becomes not a look and say cage, and now the counter positive implies that this becomes oh, maybe I was wrong here. This is a 1, this becomes a killer. This becomes a look and say, that's fine actually. Oh no, I almost made a mistake here. I thought that it makes both of these killer cages, but I have already proven that those cannot both be killer cages. So yeah, ignore that. I still don't know what's happening here. I think I can get rid of this. This feels like it's a step, but maybe it's not the next step. So okay, maybe let's think a little bit more about these here. Each individual cell is from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe that is relevant for the rows. It might be. Putting 2 4s here seems fine. We don't have too many repeats in this column, but I think it's enough to put 2 4s into those cells. We've already proven that this is very tight. Maybe I can get a little bit more out of this. Yeah, I've already proven that not using a 9 would force 8, 8, 8, 7 and use up all the repeats here. What's the alternative? The alternative is that there is at least one 9 here, which only introduces one repeated digit. If we leave it at 1 9 here, we still need a repeated digit. So we would have to either repeat the 9 or repeat an 8 or repeat the 7 in some fashion. So I think either way, we use up all the repeats between those digits, which means that this cannot be a 9. This will be a 1, which doesn't eliminate anything for the column, but it's still interesting because it means that all the digits that are used in this cage are no longer available in those cells. And those are all part of high cages. So I think it's worthwhile to think about, do we need an 8 in this cage? If I can prove that, I will get this sorted out. And I also can limit this a lot because, well, this cannot be an 8 anyway. But yeah, sorting this out seems good. So let's try to figure out if there is a way to not use an 8 here. So I can use 2 9s that would use up all the repeats. That would be 18. Then I need another 13, which could be 6, 7. Yeah, so that's fine. if I don't want to use an 8, and there is no other way to not use an 8. So if this is an 8, it puts a lot of pressure on this. Because, yeah, then this becomes 9967. And I've already shown that if this doesn't contain a 9, it's 8887, which puts a 5 here, and yeah, puts some more pressure here. Right, I feel like I'm close to something, but it's not quite enough. And intuitively, I would say that the row 9 and column 9 should be more powerful already than they turn out to be. I've already shown that if this is a killer cage, it's exactly 7-6. Is that a problem for this row? No, I don't think so. I don't need 7 and 6 here, and whatever maybe I can show that I need one of them here, and if the other is here, then this would have to be, yeah, that's interesting. Then this would have to contain a 5. It's not really. Maybe there's something about this column still. Right, I've already looked at this. Does this have any implications here? I don't think so, because I mean, the 944 option that I was talking about would limit this to 1 or 4. And 4 would have an interaction with this, but 1 wouldn't. So, well, if this is 944, actually this is a 4. And then it has an impact here. Because 944 here also makes this a 944. If I have an 8 here, this would have to be 881. This would also have to be 881. And now I can just put a 1 here. And there was another option, which was it? Oh, that this just introduces a 7, and these become look and say cages. If that is the case, I have to be a little bit careful, because if I make this a 9, I couldn't make this 1 and 7, because then this is also a killer cage. So if I make this a 9, this would have to be 7 and 7. Oh, no, this would have to be 9, 9, and 7. Yeah, because 7 and 7 breaks the look and say cage. It's actually more constrained than I thought. This is a 9. I either get 9, 7 or 4, 4. And 4, 4 seems to be a little bit dissonant with the column, but not too much. I mean, the 4 is not helping with this, but it could still just pair up with a 7 here, and like 7 seems like a very plausible candidate in this column. Yeah, but 997, then I would need exactly 1 7 here, and either accompany it with 2 9s or 2 1s. Right, maybe there's something going on if this is a 4. I mean, 4 would limit the options for this to be a killer cage, because if this is a killer, it has to be 4 7 or 5 6, and 4 would remove the 4 7 option, but also 4 allows this to be look and say cage. While one wouldn't. If this is a 1, I already showed that this is then a killer cage, which makes this a look and say cage, which seems totally fine. Yeah. 3, 4, 5, 2, 3. Right. Yeah, 5s are not options here. Actually, so yeah, that's actually much more interesting now that I know that this is not a 5. Because if this is a killer cage, it's 4 and 7, which makes this a 1. If this is a look and say cage, it contains a 1. So there is always a 1 in one of those two, or one of those 3. And there is always a 4 in one of those 3. Is that right? If this is a 1, this becomes exactly 4, 7. Yeah. And it can't be 4, 7. Right, this is just a look and say cage. Okay, I could have got this much earlier. So this is a 1, this is a 4, which forces the 9, 4, 4 option. That's a very fair step. I just didn't see it. Part of it was really just this central pencil mark that I failed to remove here. Okay, so this is a look and say cage, which I don't think puts pressure on this. This can still be a 7-6 easily. We don't have any tension with 7s and 6s. If it's a look and say cage, it's almost more interesting, but it only puts a 2 here, so that's still not that much. Okay, but getting this 1 gives me a 9 here. Because I cannot introduce a new repeater digit here. This becomes a 5. This column was already done, so that's not helpful here. But we should only have 4 options here. 2, 3, 4, 6, and this time I will remove the 2 from here because it seems to be important. Right, so 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. So what happens if this is 7, 6? The remaining digits would be 2, 3, and 5. Which seems all okay. The 7, 6 here, what I can see is that it puts pressure on this 31 cage, but maybe that's not too important. I do know that this is also 944 because 944 is the only way to make this cage work, and that this is actually also a killer cage. And we cannot have a 9 here, so this is one of the 4s, and this is a proper 4-9 pair. Right, and this 4 removes one of the options. I already looked at this, so this makes this a 5, 6, 8. We cannot have any repeats here, so this is not 4 or 6. This is a 3, this is not 3 or 4, so it's a 2, which puts a 3 here, which makes this a killer cage. Okay, that's exactly the converse from what I've thought, but makes sense that it resolves like this. And now 2, 5. Right, and this Kropki dot just makes this 5 and 6. It seems like it's speeding up now a little bit. We still have a lot of things to do here, I guess, but That's fine. Right, and these are okay. Yeah, I couldn't have repeats here. I was just second guessing myself for a moment. This should only have 1 or 7. Yeah, it only has 2 options. And I mean, it's impossible to put a 1 here. Yeah, that's just for this cell, it's impossible to put a 1 here. And I showed earlier that there are all the repeats are used up within those. So I should be able to just write in a 6 here. Which means that this cage doesn't use a 6. Which is interesting. And it has a 7 already in it, which is not too high. So the remaining digits sum up to 24. Right. So this could just be a bunch of 8s, which seems very, very funny, and I think it might be what it's going to be. If it's not, if I remove one of the 8s and replace it with a 9, I will have to replace another 8 with a 7. And I don't think I can put 2 9s here because then I would need a 6. Right, 18, 25, yeah. So this is either 888 or 987. Right, and this will always include at least 1 8 up to 3, so this cannot be an 8. There are probably easier ways to think about this. Right, and this one cannot repeat anywhere in the row because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we have only 6 different digits. So this must be a 2, 3, 4 digit from 2, 3, 4, which means that the 15 cage can no longer be a killer cage. So it needs a 5 to be a valid look and say cage. Right. Does this 5 do something for the column? Because this is only column 4. And this 6, 7 is always a new digit for the column. So I can see that this cannot be an 8. And that we can never introduce an 8 actually. So this will be 7, 7. So 4, 5, 7, 9 are the digits. So this is a 4. 4, 5, 7, 9, and there is only, well, this cannot be a look and say cage, so it's a killer cage. There's only one sum that works. Right, so this is now done. Yeah, we can use the repeats in row 8 and row 9 to get more digits here. Yeah, this one seems very interesting now, but maybe let's look at this actually. This is 1, 5, 6, 9, and this is always a new digit that's introduced. If the new digit introduced is a 7, then we need a 6 here. Which would make this a look and say cage. Right, yeah, if this is a 7, then we only have 6 as the only even digit for the row, which means that there is a 6 on this, which prevents us from making this 9898. Because even if we make the 6 and the 7, we just lose the possibility to max this out. So if this is a 7, this would imply that this is a look and say cage, but if this is a 7, we don't have a 4 in those, and we can only put up to 2 4s into this cage. So this is always a 4. This is a 7. Right, and now there is more flexibility here. But I think it's still true to say that making this 9 8 9 8 doesn't work because we don't have an 8 in this row. So this is always a look and say cage, which means that there is a 4 in one of those, which is a new digit for this row, which 2 4 7. Oh, I think I broke it. 34. Yeah, that looks bad. It's 5 digits in row 4. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Am I happy with? I would just make a check here. Okay, so this check, of course, only checks the big digits, so there might still be problems with my central pencil marks or with my coloring. But everything is fine so far. So what I was thinking is that 7 here leads to a contradiction. And the contradiction was that this cage just cannot exist. But yeah, I didn't consider the possibility that I have 3 9s in this cage, actually. Because if I have 3 9s in this cage, then I can make the last digit a 7. And if this is a 7, then I have 7 and 9 available here, and I have 9 available here, and everything is fine. And I'm pretty sure that this is what has to happen now, because I've disproved the alternative, but I want to look for something that's more elegant, because I don't think I have to push that hard for this step. So yeah, what's a nice way to see that? I mean, this 34 is very, very interesting, because introducing if this is a look and say cage, it introduces a 4 into this row and this row. I already said this earlier, which is very interesting. And introducing a 4 here is especially interesting because it makes this a 4. And well, but that seems fine, except that the point where it broke was actually this row, which maybe is the reason I should look at this. So this already has 9 8 and 2 as digits that are always in, and this will always be a new digit, so this cannot be a 5. Okay, that's an easy deduction. Right, and if this is a 7, this is also a 7. And the converse is that if this is a 4, this is a 9. Right. Putting 2 4s here, does this work? Seems to work, I think. It would always introduce a repeated digit in the column. Yeah, I think we already are pretty saturated on 7 8s and 9s. So these 4 digits already have at least one repeat. And if there is no 7, they have 2 repeats. It's probably fine. Yeah, so what was the contradiction here actually? So I was assuming that 4 here breaks because that 7 here breaks actually because it just makes this too small to be a valid killer, which means that I assumed that a 7 here would uh, just break this overall. Maybe I can just see why a 4 here breaks. So the problem here was that this became a 7, but that might still be fine. Actually, maybe let's look at this for a moment. 2, 5, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, that's still 1 digit to go. That's fine. For this column, we have to make this a 5. So if this doesn't introduce a new digit via 1, then this must be something new. I mean, this column is still interesting because we already have a lot of 7, 8, 9s. We already have at least 1 repeat here. If this is a look and say cage, we have to plug in just 2 4s in the remaining cells. And then we get a repeated 4, we get something repeated in those 4 cells, and this also repeats. So this actually has to be a killer cage. Which is good because there is still tension here with like those 4. I can only use 1 more digit from 7, 8, 9. And I think I have to use 1 more digit from 7, 8, 9 because if I just make it 6, 6, 9, it's just not enough. So the last 7, 8, 9 digits, there will be 1 more 7, 8, 9 digit in the 24 cage, which means that this is a 4. And it means that I have used up all the repeats for this column. So this becomes a 5. This is not a 4. Making this a 6 would be interesting because it wouldn't allow me to use the highest non 7, 8, 9 digit in this cell, in this cage. But yeah, it's probably still fine. Right, so how can I make this work? I can make this 9, 9, and 6. Yeah, that's what it has to be, actually. So this cannot be a 7. This is just 9, 6, which makes this a 2. It's a bit unfortunate because now this cage will not create any more help. Right, and just to confirm, yeah, we need this to be a 7 because, well, I was talking about like 7, 8, 9 saturation, but now that there is nothing else for a 7, this just needs to be a 7. Which means that this is not the option with the 3 8s. This is now an 8, 9 pair, I think. 17 plus 14, yes. That works. This is probably interesting because this row was already under pressure, and this is a 9. I think it breaks because we only have 1, 5, 6, and this is the last new digit, so we cannot introduce an 8 into this row. So this must be a 6. This is a 5, 7. If this is a 7, this is also a 7. We can still put 3 4s into this, which is that's really nice that that this is ambiguous up until this point. The 24 cage needs a second 9. which means that we didn't introduce a new digit here. I think that means that this is now resolved. I mean, it's always resolved because either it introduces a new digit or not. I just need to do the counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we are in row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need a 1 here. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's 5 digits in column 5. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 are the only things that are allowed here. Right, and in this row we have 9, 8, 2, 4, 7. So this is not a 6. And this is from 9, 8, 2, 4, 7. I'm going to do like pretty heavy pencil marking here because I can see that this 24 cage only has 2 options. One option is that it's a look and say cage, and these are all 4s, which seems fine still. And the other option is that it's a killer cage, in which case they are all 9s. So every one of these 3 cells is only 4 or 9, which is very interesting. If I put 2 9s here, well, if I put 2 9s here, I can still make this a 4 or 7. If I put 4s here, it also makes this a 4, and then this becomes a 7. Maybe that's the point, that these two must be different. If I make this all 4s, then this would have to be a 4, this would be a 7, and then I introduce 7 and 4 as new digits in this row. And that's too much. Yeah, that's a problem. So this is actually a killer cage after all, which also makes sense from a uniqueness standpoint because it just does a little bit more cleanup. Now I can still make this whatever. It always introduces a new digit. For this row, I'm pretty sure that I have now 1, 5, 6, 7, 9. Yeah, this must be a 7. And now by the killer cage, this is a 4. And that resolves. This is a 9 by the cage. I could have seen this earlier, but I don't think it would have done much for the column. Right, these two are different by the cage. This one is not restricted by the cage. Here I know that there are 2 9s and 1 8 here. So it's probably the columns. Yeah, so I should be able to get this digit. I have a repeated 9. Yeah, this must be an 8. Right, I was talking earlier about like 6, 7, and 8, but I should have realized that since the 8s and the 7s were never used in those, I just have to use them in the other ones. And this needs 2 9s and 1 8, so we have this. This column, I cannot resolve this column by Somedoku, but I can put a 6 here. Yeah, I think I have to max out the repeats now, or the non-repeats, because I'm only at 4 different digits in column 6, so everything must be new. 8, 6, and this is a 9 by the cage. That's the puzzle. So yeah, very very interesting concept. Very intense finish actually. I'm impressed by this. So we had this a nice start with the where this negative constraint was actually um, very important. So with negative constraint, I mean that no cage can be look and say and a killer cage, and that just played very beautifully in the opening and was actually necessary for some of the opening deductions. Um, Very nicely done. For some reason, I really got caught up in this um, area at some point. I felt that there was a lot of pressure with the ones here, um, and that this being like center marked as one of the options, and seeing that putting a one into this would just actually put a lot of pressure here. I felt like that this was the next step, but for some reason I was just not eliminating one pencil mark from here, which just cascaded into not seeing the step really and looking at a lot of other places. But yeah, I mean, looking at other places is never a waste of time. You just see like a blurry version of the deductions that come later already, so it's all fine. Very fun puzzle. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time, maybe.